Hey guys, Justin here coming at you with another winter camping trip. I'm really excited for this one. It's the first trip that I'm showing you guys where I'm using snowshoes, and that's because I'm gonna be heading up to Twin Lakes Campground, which is up that hill over there. It's 7 kilometers to the campground, 700 meters of elevation gain. So I think snowshoes are gonna be a really good option for this trip. I'm starting this trip a little bit earlier because it gets dark so early in the wintertime. I wanna get to camp and be able to share my camp routine with you guys. What I do to pick my campsite, set up my tent, as well as go through my cook system, gather water, and all those things. I've seen some really awesome pictures of this campsite. I've never been there before, but it looks beautiful. So I'm excited to share the trip with you guys, share some awesome views, as well as some tips and tricks for winter camping. This is a really sketchy spot. Big cliff band right below me. This is all wind affected, super hard. So that's why I'm kicking out a path for my snowshoes, because this is definitely sketchy. That's steep. Time to take a little break, have a snack, enjoy these views. This trail is actually pretty good for views. One of my favorite snacks in the wintertime, sesame snaps. Super good. Super important to stay hydrated in the wintertime. It's really easy to get dehydrated. I see people getting dehydrated all the time when they're on winter trips. That's why it's super important when we get to camp to talk about how to get water effectively and efficiently when you're on winter trips. It always blows my mind when you're traveling in the winter how quickly you can move through the mountains. So you can see the highway right there, right on the shadow basically, that I came in on, parked over there, came down, dropped into that valley where there's a lake, and then have come up this ridge. So you can cover distance pretty quickly. And this is a steep approach. And there we have the legendary Castle Mountain. Beautiful, beautiful spot. This trail is awesome. The last little bit has been brutal. A lot of people stop at that lake that we just passed, and because of that, I've been breaking trail. There's really no trail, so I'm just trying to navigate as best I can through pretty deep snow. If I go off to the wrong spot a little bit, it can be waist deep in snow, even with snowshoes. So we're at the campground, made it to the lower Twin Lake campground. So that's the lake right back there. Just looks like a snowy field right now. But that was a tough slog. That last 2 kilometers, I was breaking trail through really deep snow. There was no established trail. That was some of the harder work that I've put in this winter. But I made it with quite a bit of daylight left. Even when I'm not filming, I'll ensure that I get to camp with quite a bit of daylight so that I have light in order to set up my tent. There's nothing worse than setting your tent up in the dark. And then the first thing I do when I get to camp is I send a message to my check-in person, just letting them know on my inReach device here that I made it to camp nice and safe. The next step is to get camp all set up, and there's a lot of things I do quite a bit differently in the wintertime compared to summertime. The first thing is campsite selection. So I'm gonna go take a walk through the campground here, and we'll talk about what I look for when picking a spot for my tent pad, as well as getting the camp all set up so it's nice and comfy for the evening. So we're in the cooking area. You can see the bear lockers right back there. Look at that mushroom of snow on top. That's crazy. And then this is the table that I'm gonna probably dig out just so I can have a nice place to cook and eat my dinner. The other thing that I need to think about is where am I gonna set up my tent? And I usually like to set up near the amenities, near where the picnic table is, not too far. And it looks like this is a good spot. There's some nice views over there. But other than the amenities, there's a couple other things I take into consideration when picking where I'm gonna set up my tent. The first thing being protection from wind. I don't want to be in some big open area where wind gusts are going to be pounding my tent all night. I do have a really good mountaineering tent, but I just don't want to deal with that. I don't have to be getting up in the middle of the night and re-guying out different parts of my tent so it doesn't blow over. And this area right behind me, right over there, looks like an awesome spot, sheltered from the wind. It is actually quite windy out there. I felt it over the course of the hike, but this is a very nice sheltered spot. Another thing is tree bombs. So a tree bomb is a bunch of snow that builds up in a bough of a tree, and those get really hard and become like bombs. They're actually really heavy, really dense, and if one of those falls on your tent, it's gonna give you a rude awakening, probably demolish your tent. And I think we got a great area right in there. That's where I'm gonna set up my tent. And now that we've picked out where we're gonna set the tent up, time to get to work. And if you're new to winter camping, you may wonder how you set a tent up on snow. Do you just sink in? Do you just throw it up and hope for the best? There are some tips and tricks in order to do it effectively. And the first thing involves packing down all the snow where you're gonna set your tent up. And to do that, you just walk in a circle over and over again, pack that snow down, and then the key is that you leave it for at least 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, that snow is gonna harden right up and you're gonna have a great platform to set your tent up on. The key is to make sure that you stomp out a big enough area to accommodate your tent as well as any of your guy out points. So that's why it's so big right here. I'd rather make a bigger tent pad than a smaller one. You also need to make sure that you're leaving the snow long enough to harden. It may seem hard after you've walked over it a whole bunch of times, but the key is waiting that 30 plus minutes because then it's gonna be rock hard. And while I'm waiting for my tent pad to harden, there's a bunch of other things I do around camp to make things easy and comfortable. The first thing I like to do is make my winter highway. And what that means is that I basically just go and walk to every place that I might need to get to. So the picnic table right here, I'll make a nice little pathway to that, kind of clear the snow off maybe. And I know the outhouses are further down that way, so I'll create a path over there just in case there's a morning emergency I need to get there really quick, as well as I'll take a look to see if I need to dig it out at all. And if I'm planning on having a fire, then another camp chore that I'll do while I'm waiting for my tent pad to harden is collect some firewood, chop it, cut it, process it, and get all that ready for a fire later in the night. And while I'm doing all my camp chores, I'll leave my hiking or travel clothes on because I might get a little bit sweaty, and my hiking clothes are quick drying and manage moisture and sweat quite a bit better than my camp clothes. And on that note, there's probably a few videos that you guys would be interested in if you are curious about the gear that I use on these trips. The first one being the clothes that I hike in. So I have a video dedicated to my winter hiking clothes, and I go over everything that I wear and why. I'll post that video in the video description so you can go check that out if you're curious. The other two are my camp clothes. So I have a video dedicated to everything that I change into and wear around camp during the wintertime. And the third being all of the gear that I bring. So that's my tent, my pack, my sleeping pad, my sleeping bag. I go over all of that in my gear list video. Like I said, if you're curious about those videos, I'll post them in the video description, as well as a list of all the gear that I used on this trip. I'm done the camp chores. the ground is nice and hard, it's time to set the tent up. And setting up your tent in the wintertime is a bit of a unique beast. We already went over how to get the ground ready for it. Actually getting it to stay put is another battle entirely. And there's a few different things that I do that I find make it easier in the wintertime to set up your tent compared to some other methods, as well as still gets your tent really secure and locked down onto the ground. I just have the tent body laid out right now. I use a single wall mountaineering tent that uses tent poles in order to give it structure, not a trekking pole tent like I usually use in the summertime. Those of you not familiar with winter camping might be asking how I get tent pegs to stay in the snow. Even though the snow is nice and hard, it's still pretty fluffy. In order to do that, I use winter specific tent pegs. These are snow pegs. They're wider, they are longer, and they actually hold in snow really, really well. I use these for the four corners of the tent as well as the vestibule. For the guy outlines, I use a different method, and I'll show you that once we get there. Now I want to show you what I do for the guy outline. So today I'm just gonna guy out from this point right here and this point right here. And there's a method that I use called the dead man anchor that really locks the guy lines down, and if it gets really windy, it's probably not gonna move. It's a bit weird to explain what a dead man anchor is, so it's probably easiest just to show you. The first thing you wanna do is go get a stick or two, depending on how many guy outs you're gonna have. I got two, so I got 2 sticks. About a foot in length is probably enough. You don't need anything too long or too thick for that matter. So this is a neat little system that my tent has where it has little hooks on either end of the guy out rope, and then use that to pull the tent out. Next, what you want to do is you want to dig a trench into the snow in a T shape pointing at your guy out line. So I'm going to just do that right here. Has to be the length of the stick as well, and you might see where this is going. Just dig about 6 inches down, and then you get the T going out this way towards the tent. And we're gonna use the same principle that we used to set up the tent. We're gonna put the guy outline attached onto this stick here in the trench, and then put snow on top of it, pack it down, and let it harden. For those of you who have done this before, you then know that getting your guy outline out from the trench can be a bit of a pain in the butt in the morning time after the snow gets really, really hard. And in order to address that problem, I do something a little bit different. I haven't seen that many people do it before. Actually, I don't think I've seen anyone do it before, but I get a little piece of string with a carabiner and 2 loops on it. So what I do is I put the carabiner through the 2 little loops on the string. I put the stick through the loop, and then I run my guy outline to the carabiner, like so. So we stick that in there, and then we can put snow on top of the stick, pack it down. And the nice thing about this method is, in the morning, I just undo one of the loops from the carabiner, and then I can just pull the string right through. Because it's so thin, it slices through the snow, and I don't need to worry about having to dig the stick up like you would if you had the stick going straight through all this loop here. If you want a little bit more space in your vestibule as well, then you can dig that out using a shovel. Dig down about a foot and you'll get quite a bit more space in there. I'm not gonna do it today because I'm feeling a little bit lazy. But there's another thing that I do, and that's open up all the vents in the tent. I'm not gonna get in there for a while, and some of the things that I'm gonna be putting inside the tent might have a bit of moisture in them. I don't want any moisture building up in there while I'm cooking and enjoying the evening. Once I have my tent set up, then I unload all of my stuff into it, get my sleeping bag all set and puffed up, because it's really important to get your sleeping bag out of a stuff sack as soon as possible, get it nice and lofty. And then after that, I'm gonna go use this picnic table and get some dinner going, because I'm starting to get really hungry. Once I'm done all my camp chores, got everything unloaded into my tent, that's when I change into my camp clothes. My camp clothes are really warm, much warmer than my travel clothes. I'm actually getting a little bit cold in my hiking clothes right now, so I'm really excited to get into my camp clothes. There's a lot of merino wool, fleece, down. It's really warm stuff, and that's what you need if you're gonna be sitting around camp in the wintertime. After I get changed here, we'll get into some of the cooking stuff that I do. So I use a special kind of stove in the wintertime, different than my summer stove, as well as that's the river right there, and we're not getting water out of there. So getting water is a little bit different. As you probably guessed, in order to get water, we melt snow down. But there are a few tips and tricks that I'm gonna give you in order to do that efficiently. Once you get camps all set up, the next thing is water and food. So I'm gonna use a picnic table as my food prep, water cooking area. And hopefully on your hike in, you were smart and stayed hydrated the whole time. So you probably don't have too much water left. So the next step is getting water. And in order to do that, like we talked about, we're gonna melt snow. I set up my snow gathering spot just over there. So I already have the route all packed down, and I could also just use snow straight from the wall right here, which I might do as well. And it's important to have enough snow melting capacity. So in the summertime, you may use a smaller pot, but in the wintertime, I recommend at least 2 liters. I have here the Tokes titanium 2-liter pot. I'm gonna go fill the pot up with snow, and then I'll show you a little trick for melting snow quickly. Getting drinking water in the wintertime is actually a pretty big chore because this amount of snow is gonna melt down to not a lot of water. And because of that, you have to keep adding snow into the pot in order to get a lot of water in it. And something I like to do so that I'm not having to go and scrounge for snow is I make a bunch of little snowballs and keep them near the pot, and then I can crumble them into the pot as the snow melts down. And then hopefully you didn't drink all your water on the hike up. It's always good to save a little bit, because if you put a little bit of water in with the snow, just about like half a cup, then the snow is going to melt a lot faster because water conducts heat a lot better. So you have water in the bottom of the pot and it's conducting that heat right into the snow and melting it really quickly. So that's just a little hack to get the snow to melt faster. Let's talk about the stove that I have here. So this is the MSR Whisperlight Universal. There's a few things that you need to take into account if you are winter camping, because you're not gonna be able to cook the same way that you do in the summertime. And the first thing you need to realize, if you're used to using canisters like I have here with isobutane in it, then you're gonna have some troubles in the wintertime. Upright canister stoves don't work as well because all the fuel in the canister is liquid. And in the summertime when it's warm, when a lot of the fuel in the canister is gas, that gas rises, comes out of the stove, and you can light it. That just doesn't happen in the wintertime. And because of that, there's a few things that a good canister winter stove will have. First up, the canister will be inverted. So the valve for the canister is facing down. The second thing is that your stove should have a preheating tube. So what happens is a little bit of gas, and mostly liquid, goes to the stove, and you light it, and that gas turns into flame and heats up this tube. And then what happens with that is all the liquid that's coming through gets heated up and turned into gas, so you get a really nice steady flame coming out of your stove. And this kind of stove is really good from about freezing down to minus 20 degrees Celsius. So let's get this stove lit. We're running out of light here, and then we're gonna melt the snow. Got a little burnt. So with these systems, you will get a lot of flame right at the beginning. And then once that heating tube heats up and starts turning the liquid into gas, then the flame's gonna even out a bit and get that nice blue flame that you're used to. So that's winter camp life. You guys probably can't see me so well anymore. I'm gonna melt this water, cook my meal, eat, and then go to bed. I'm gonna watch some TV, read a book, and then have a really good night's sleep. Good morning, guys. Had another great backcountry sleep. I'm gonna wake up, get outside, and then I'm gonna talk with you about my morning routine when I'm winter camping. And it looked like it might have snowed a little bit here. There's some snow on the walls of the tent, so I'm curious to see what the conditions are like outside. Out of bed, out of the tent. It's a beautiful morning. It didn't snow quite as much as I thought it did, but there's a little bit of a dusting on everything, making everything look super fresh, really beautiful. And I slept in, so the sun has risen, and I'm gonna be able to do my morning camp routine in the daylight as well as hike out in the daylight, which sometimes isn't always the case. If I'm in a big rush or I'm trying to cover lots of miles, then sometimes I'll be getting everything done in the mornings in the dark. But I want to run through my morning routine with you guys, because if you have an effective morning routine, then you'll be more comfortable and warm as you wake up, and then you'll also be more comfortable and warm on the trail, because some of the things that you do are going to impact the rest of your day. And the number one thing any time of year is hydration. And I didn't mention this last night, but before I go to bed, I always boil a bunch of water and then put that in my Nalgene and inside this insulated sleeve. And I don't bring this into my sleeping bag with me like some people do. The insulated sleeve here keeps the water from freezing overnight. It's very, very effective. But what I like about having this 1 liter with me is when I wake up in the morning, I can have a drink of water. I have that ready to go. And then I can also use this to pour a little bit of water in my pot as I melt snow, and I can use it in my breakfast. So waking up with a liter of water readily available is a really good practice and sets you up for success for the rest of the morning. Before I even get out of the tent, I like to get everything as packed up as possible, and I actually change into my hiking or travel clothes. And then I put on my down jacket, down pants, and down booties over top of my hiking clothes to warm them up a little bit. Because I have really quick drying hiking clothes, they're never wet in the morning. If anything, they're just a little bit damp, and getting my down insulative layers over top of them and then doing some activity inside the tent actually warms them up really quickly. So now that I'm out of the tent, I have my sleeping bag packed up, I have my sleeping pad rolled up, I have everything kind of contained into its little individual bags and into the corner of the tent where I can easily reach them. And then once that's done, I'm still continuing to think about hydration. That liter of water that I have prepped from the night before, that's basically just good for my morning. I still need another 2 liters for my hiking. And then I eat breakfast. For breakfast, I have oatmeal, instant oats. I just pour cold water in here. If you want to, you can use boiling water, but I just can't be bothered, so I always eat it cold. And then once I've eaten breakfast, have my water prepped for the day, I'll take my tent down, pack up my pack, and then I'll take off my down layers here, put them in my pack as well, and then I'm ready to hit the trail. And it's looking like it's gonna be a beautiful day to hike out. You can kind of see my trail just over there, so I'm glad it didn't snow too much because it was pretty brutal breaking trail down to get here yesterday. So I'm excited that I'm not gonna have to do that. I'll just be able to follow my trail out. Like I said, I'll post links to all my gear lists in the video description. If you want to check out some of my other winter content, then I'll also post a link to my winter playlist right up there and you can look at that. If you guys have any questions about my winter routine, let me know in the comments. I know some of you have never winter camped before and it's kind of a unique, different beast. So definitely let me know if there's any questions that I can answer for you. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time.